welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bhoe on MCTV and U95 Multicultural Radio, Hot Like Pepper Radio. We're glad to have you on board, and this morning we have as our first guest, Professor Brian Copeland, and we'll have a conversation with him about the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and the University of the West Indies generally, and on education in the Caribbean. Morning, Professor Copeland. How are you?
I'm trying my best to be good, Bhoe. It's good to.
You had a little hitch there with the technology. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm supposed to know about these things. It always happens to me.
Yeah, well, that is the problem with technology. I mean, it's so efficient, it's so proficient, it's such a boon, but a lot of time you get glitches. So,
yes.
All right, but we are here, we're talking. So I want to start by getting into something everybody can appreciate and understand and have gone through the experience about, which is that we have gone through COVID, and everybody who has a child of school age knows that this has been a very difficult period for education. And anybody who has a university student or who is a university student would also know that there have had to be many adjustments made in order to get an education during this COVID period. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what has happened on the campus and in the university generally?
Yeah, sure. So much has happened. In the first instance, with respect to applicants, we have had to adjust the matriculation conditions simply because CAPE results are coming out later than normally than in pre-COVID times, I would say. So we don't expect CAPE results to be out until October, and this will affect many programs that require CAPE 1 as well as CAPE 2. So the adjustment has been made in most of the programs to accept only CAPE 1, and this happened last year, and it was decided that this year it would continue, given what's going on in 2021. That's the first issue. Examinations. We've been using what we call alternative assessment methods because we can't have face-to-face exams. And so what we have been doing is so I'm getting a slight echo. What we have been doing is changing the form of the exam. So we have different types of take-home exams. And I know some people don't like that, are very uncomfortable with it. Some courses have been converted to 100% coursework and the like. So there are different methods that are now being engaged or being utilized, all approved by the university itself. That's the wider university. We have not had classes since March last year. We basically have shut down the campus. And it's accessed only by staff in particular, sometimes visitors. I'll explain that in a second, on a need-to basis. So we've done that because to observe the protocols, I had to show this to my staff. They were a little bit resistant to stop face-to-face classes. The average occupancy of a classroom would have topped out at something like 12 to 16%, which means then that you would have to reschedule just for one class, have multiple offerings just to offer one particular class. So it doesn't make sense. So basically, we've gone online. I'm glad to say that we've pivoted to the online environment very, very quickly. Within a week, I think we had moved from 30% courses online to 100% online. As we look forward to the new semester, some students are concerned about labs, and we've had to delay some laboratory exercises because of the very nature. And however, we do think that if the lockdown is lifted in time for September, and certainly we've gotten this ease right now, we could, in fact, and the ministry does allow it, if you look at their regulations and so on, we could, in fact, now start back on a proper schedule of laboratory exercises only, not teaching, but laboratory exercises and field trips. So we should be able to see some semblance of normalcy, at least with respect to that aspect of our delivery. There are
When
several
you
other things that we're doing. I think that covers it.
the you're trying to get labs back on stream and you're trying to get your field trips back on stream, but you're going to retain your 100% courses online in September.
Yeah.
So
The
basically,
way,
you've converted to an online university, so to speak, at least for the pedagogical part of the
yes.
education. Is
Yeah.
that
Isn't
correct?
that a good thing? Isn't that a good thing?
No,
We've been
I think
trying
it's
to
wonderful.
move to that.
Yeah, in my conversation with you, you said
Yeah.
something about the fact that COVID had accelerated our
Yes.
walking to the future. I like that phrase,
Yes.
walk into the future. And so you've had to do this in quick time. Well, UWI was quite prepared, I think.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, the technology and so on was quite strong and up to date and had been there for some time. And you have been able to do the conversion and manage it pretty well
Yes.
now. So you can really be a global online campus, can't you?
Well, even before COVID, we were
Yes,
looking at that.
yes,
When you factor in the matter of saturation, medical sciences and engineering to a certain extent, that existed pre-COVID, and since I think it's about 2 years now, we've been signaling that we have to look at a global enrollment in order for the university to continue and to grow and develop, and that meant therefore going online.
yes.
COVID comes along, and all of a sudden, within a week, we are online. It's not the best of scenarios right now because we do have to more effectively improve the ability of the staff, of the teaching staff, to engage fully all the benefits of being online and delivering online. But you're quite right. This now allows us, prepares us well to go into what the Vice Chancellor calls UE Global,
Yes.
and we are ready for it as far as the technology is concerned. Some adjustments are required. Some marketing is required to see which areas you want to get into for that global student body. But I think at this point in time, we are quite ready.
But that gets me to an issue that has to do with what can I say, UWI's real value as a Caribbean university. I mean, the value of a university like the University of the West Indies is not only that you would be able to access global knowledge and cutting edge issues that are happening all over the world, but that you'd have very specific Caribbean-based education, that you would have education that relates to, let's say, tropical countries, islands, that would relate, for instance, to Trinidad and Tobago, and the rest of the region. And those things would be very valuable in a global university setting because you would be like the expert university on these areas. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, and in fact, the UE has been discussing that aspect of it. The whole UE global discussion, which has accelerated as well over the last year or so, um, looks at which of our products, and I've been using that term deliberately of late, which of our products have the greatest value in going to a global clientele. I've been using business speak for the university, much to the chagrin of those who are traditional academics.
Yeah.
But to me, it is very, very, very relevant. And we have to really all start thinking like that. And so, in engaging this new world, we have to look at what brings value to which market. Where are our opportunities? Where does it exist? And you're quite right. We have some unique offerings here, particularly with regard to culture. Culture is one that came to mind very, very quickly, and that we've always entertained exchange students for, one way or the other. and we need to sort of ramp that up to develop it, shape it, to accommodate both Caribbean Caribbean students as well as global non-Caribbean students as well. So yes, but the bigger issue as well is that even for the other courses, the other programs, we've been looking at curriculum and pedagogical reform,
Yes.
which basically says, let's look at this package that we're offering. Let's look at the processes that drive it. Let's look at the target output for what I call the teaching and learning unit within the UE enterprise. Let's develop that. Let's ask the questions of which of those packages, those products, are of greatest importance to Caribbean students and, more importantly, Caribbean development. So there must be a stronger alignment with the labor market when it comes to these programs. All too often in the past, as you would know, um, a faculty would come with a recommendation for a program, and when you dig deep, in the past, we would have found that they would not have done, due diligence, if you like, on the viability of that course and program. Well, we are going away from that. We are looking at you're going to bring a course forward, or you're looking at an existing course or program. What is the market? How many students are you attracting? If it's a small number, what is the strategy that you have for doing this? Because it's more than just finances. A lot of it is driven, of course, by finances. But there might be a strategic reason for you having, let's say, a small class for a short period of time. What resources are you applying, utilizing to ensure that this course is delivered, this course and program are delivered at a high level of quality, one that is commensurate with a university of our standard. Those are the kind of that's the kind of thinking we've been getting into. It's almost like an internal transformation. It's been difficult if we're not there yet, but that is kind of like what we're looking at. So therefore, the global UE is really an offshoot of that, because if we don't get our delivery mechanism, our program selection, if you don't get all of those ducks lined up in a row, you probably will not last more than 2 years given the competition that is out there. So we really and truly have to do the tinkering that ensures that the University of West Indies is robust to the core, I think is the best way I can call it. I can describe it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, education is a very expensive business, as you
Yes.
well know, and it takes a lot to run a university. And technology costs. So when you make those conversions, I mean, in order to sustain them, you have to perpetually put out money to make sure, and you have to also accelerate your capacity. You have to bring whatever innovations are in the market that can support educational innovation. You have to bring it. That costs a lot. And we've had a situation where governments all over the region have been hard-pressed. In Barbados, for instance, they cut the support for students. In Jamaica, students have to pay. There are very few who are supported by the state except for scholarships and stuff like that. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we've had a severe cut in gate.
Yes.
What is the challenge of university financing, and how are you approaching a solution to that for UWI and certainly the St. Augustine campus?
Okay. So we have been looking. Thanks for that question. We have been looking at, 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 at new ways to finance the University of the West Indies. And before I go into that, I should, in fact, point out that the tuition fees, which theoretically should cater for 20% of our economic costs, according to a model agreed to by governments and university many years ago, those tuition fees have not changed for 20 years. So if you look at the cost of our program, it's actually quite low. At the same time, there's an issue of the ability of students to pay. And especially if your aim is to develop the region, which in my book means that you have to access every single individual who has the capability to take full advantage of a university education. And some of them can't see the door of the university for whatever reason. You have to look at that whole issue. So one of the ways we are looking at this is to say, look, let's get the tuition fees up to date. And there's a whole story behind that because we've actually developed a mechanism, a method, existing method, but we applied it to the university for costing courses and programs. It is still a work in progress, but we have done it fairly well for one of the faculties, and it can be applied to about half of all the faculties that we have. And based on that, we can actually determine what is a reasonable tuition fee. So that determines then to someone who is a student and therefore a potential customer, that determines the cost. And now we have to look at the price because you could determine now based on different factors what are you going to charge students. You can look at loans, you can look at scholarships, expanded scholarships, and so on.
Did we
What
lose
we are
the
looking
phone?
at right now is identifying what is the real cost of doing this on a per student basis. And that will help us, that will inform the approach we take with respect to financing the university. At the same time, we are looking at alternative sources of income. Vice Chancellor has spoken about making arrangements with the private sector to help support the university education. As you quite rightly said, it is very expensive. We on our own have also embarked on some programs of our own. We have ventured into the commercial space, looking at university spin-offs and startups that help fund the university. Although I will admit that is not going to be a major stream, it is actually more directed to developing the economy of the region, but it will bring some income. So apart from the government subventions, which, as you say, governments are challenged to meet what we've arranged, um, we are looking at alternative sources, including looking at how do we finance from a student perspective, how do we finance that education. It doesn't necessarily mean an increase in tuition for students. I need to make that clear because we're looking at price and cost. We need to know what it really costs. And I have to admit that after 20 years, even the formula that was used in 2001, we kind of quite lost on it. But the fees are there, and it seems that it sustains us for now. But we have to identify that cost, then set a price, find alternative mechanisms for funding students, and then operate from there.
Okay, I mean, the, we have a challenge with students, which is that, I mean,
Yes.
any society needs human and intellectual capital in order to develop. In fact, it's becoming clearer that if you don't have that, I mean, you can kiss development goodbye. It doesn't
Yes.
matter how many resources you have, you're going to have to bring foreigners to look after them. But in order to develop, you need to have the intellectual capital. So as
Yes.
you said, we've got to make sure everybody who can benefit from a higher education gets it. And the decisive factor in development is tertiary education. It is not secondary education. You need that foundation, but you need tertiary educated people, graduates, and you need research in order to make a difference in development. Now, if we took a decision that we would create the conditions for everybody to get a university education, couldn't we develop a formula between government, private sector, and university for financing that education? Those who can pay will pay. Those who cannot pay will get their education free. But they will pay after graduation when they
Yes.
enter the job market, when they enter the economy. So
Yes.
you postpone their payment, you do not make a payment a necessity for getting the university education, but you make payment an obligation for having received the education for free, basically. Do you think that the governments of the region might be amenable to something like that, that we could get the private sector involved so that we do not make education a challenge because of financing?
Right. So that exact proposal was made 2 years ago to our University Finance and General Purposes Committee. This is after a task force was formed that was spearheaded by PVC Denzel Williams. And it was one of the proposals that was made, among several other proposals as well. I don't think it got the benefit of discussion it deserved, but certainly it is still on the cards in terms of the methods for financing the university. I know that that the Prime Minister of Grenada and the Prime Minister of Barbados have been involved in. They've also spearheaded another committee to look at this issue. I haven't seen the report as yet. This is quite recent, but that approach that you described is actually still on the cards. It is a very reasonable one. There is one sort of challenge with it, and it has to do with jobs. Again, we come back to the fact that there is saturation in the market because everybody wants to be a doctor, an engineer, lawyer, and so on. And that is also a problem. So it is likely that a student could leave and not get a job. Exactly. And also not even get a job that they wanted, which is happening even now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you have underemployment, so to speak. There
Exactly.
is unemployment and underemployment. But
Exactly. I mean, we're only 1.3 million people.
But that raises a very important issue.
Yeah.
And I know, Professor Copeland, this will be close to your heart because of your own disposition to research and so on. UWI is a knowledge center. It is the best knowledge center we have.
Yes.
You have important researchers here. I mean, I've been talking to some of them on this particular program, as you well know. Not only your economists and so on, but I've been talking to people from agricultural sector, but talk to somebody like Professor Agard, who is involved in the sustainable development issues, climate change issues, and so on. And when I talk to them, I mean, I can basically identify projects based on their research that can be turned into entrepreneurial opportunity.
Yes.
What is missing from the university, private sector, government interface that prevents us from turning that research into knowledge into applications, applications into entrepreneurial intervention, and then a business model to monetize these research ideas and innovations?
Yeah.
Will we get to that? We have to get to that.
We're working to it. We're working to it, Bhoe. So we have created on the campus a strong innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. I call it the I&E pipeline that will take ideas such as the one you discussed out into the market and or bring it to the point, because it may not be an economic driver per se, but it could be a social driver. So you're looking at the benefit it will bring to the population one way or the other. That's social entrepreneurship. The focus right now is economic, but we are also aware that the social innovation entrepreneurship actually could bring much greater benefit to our countries than even economic. And that has to do with just perception and how people are treated and so on. But it is, I'm saying that, but we haven't really fully explored it. And so this pipeline terminates in a company that we formed called UWI Ventures Limited. And UWI Ventures is supposed to be a holding company for the spin-offs and startups that come out of UWI intellectual property. It will also allow for the general public to bring ideas to the fore, which we will interrogate. We will look at it, look at the viability, and then determine whether it is worth it to pursue a business enterprise based on that concept. So there's something happening there. It just needs one little trigger. I keep telling Jerry Brooks, who is chair of UWI Ventures, executive director at UWI Ventures, that all we need is one success, one success to make people realize there's rain falling here, so I hope it's not coming over. To
No,
make
you loud
people
and clear. Yeah.
to motivate our campus colleagues to come forward with more projects because, as you know, the turnover rate in going to a spin-off is probably of the order of 5 or 10%. So that is happening. There is a cultural a challenge that we have as a country, and many have written about it. Lloyd Best, as you know, wrote about it, and you probably know better of that than I do, the plantation economy, which says we have a mindset that says our problem, somebody else has to solve it, because that's how it was in the sugar days. Thankfully, I'm seeing that changing. Young people are online, they're on social media, they're seeing their colleagues abroad getting into business from a very, very early age, some below 20 years and so on. And they have been biting at the bit, so to speak. Within the ecosystem, we have the normal incubation and business development capability of business guidance functions that will help someone develop their business ideas before it goes to UWI Ventures. We have two companies that have been approved for incorporation, one looking at asphalt derivatives, and the other one looking at cocoa, fine cocoa, and that one is actually going through approval right now. It's behind where I wanted it to be, but I think once those start, you will see a change. You will see the triple helix that you're referring to,
Yeah.
which is government, academia, and the commercial sector, the private sector, coming together more strongly to move all of these gems that exist, that some of them are sitting there for years, have been sitting there for years, move them out so they can bring economic and social benefit to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region. We are too small, by the way, boy. I know I tend to be long-winded, but we are too small to only look at Trinidad and Tobago. We are looking at the Caribbean. And that's why it's
Okay.
important that UWI be the host, if you like, for this type of project.
Yeah, well, we have to get markets outside in the world. We can't sell to ourselves.
Nope.
There's no
Nope.
point to that. Um,
Yeah.
I want to ask you one question, and we're going to have to close.
Yes.
And so let's keep it sharp because we're going to the news, which is that, is there anything in I mean, are you doing things in the curriculum that address the fact that climate change is such a big issue in the world system today, that
Yeah.
sustainable development and the 17 goals are part of our ethos in development going forward for all countries aligned to the UN system, and that is almost everybody? Are we taking into account that we have to have more entrepreneurs but not, and not more job seekers, that we have to have competitiveness, competitive companies, that we have to have
Yes.
innovation, because sustainable development itself is a navigation process. We don't know what the
Yes.
destination is, how it will evolve. So you must have innovation if you're going to navigate that. Are we
Yes.
involved in those things in the curriculum redesign that we are doing?
Yes. We are looking at that. It is not where exactly it's supposed to be. I could point to the MSc in renewable energy, which actually is doing quite well, offered through the Faculty of Science and Technology. And there are enclaves of courses in civil engineering, for example, that treat with certain aspects of climate and climate change. So, for example, the issue of land use, which is geomatics, and also land stability is something they look at. With respect to growing the entrepreneurship countrywide, that is exactly the aim and focus of the innovation pipeline. And the target I've set to my students, whenever I speak to them, is by 2034. I expect to see a burgeoning small and medium enterprise sector based on intellectual property developed wherever, but hopefully at UWI, led by them, earning foreign exchange. Right? We're looking at a swarm similar to the German Mittelstand. I call it the Caribbean Mittelstand. Yeah, which is that small and medium enterprise cluster in Germany that is extremely strong. Yeah.
Oh,
So those are the kind of ideas that we have going forward. But we're working we've gone past baby steps. but we're still not there yet.
Okay, well, there's a lot of work to do, and I can see that you're on top of a lot of things. But time is against us. Opportunities are there to be explored, and you have to be first in the world, you know that, wherever you are. And so I wish the University of the West Indies generally, but more particularly the St. Augustine Campus, well, and I wish you well in your continued tenure there. And I hope to see some research, some curriculum change, some engagement of private sector and government that will yield some different kind of innovative approach to education. Because without knowledge, without the university, without our tertiary sector, I don't think we are going to go anywhere. And I want to thank you, Professor Copeland, for coming on.
My pleasure.
And
it's been my pleasure.
I hope that you will be willing to come again. We can continue this discussion. It's a very important discussion, education and development.
I'll be very happy to.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, then. This has been a conversation with Professor Brian Copeland of the University of the West Indies. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. I am Bhoe Tiwari. This is MCTV, Multicultural TV, and U97.5 FM Multicultural Radio, Hot Like Pepper Radio. We now pass on to Chenille Alsuran for